Okay, I want to talk a little bit about some of the particularities of card games. So you have all your setups over here, and if you're doing a card game, then you need to make sure this says dist cards. So you need to make sure this URL is correct. But hopefully you're copying a card game to make your card game, so that's taken care of. The big difference with card games is that you have decks, and you are pulling from these decks. So let's look at a deck. You can create a deck by clicking create, or you can also copy an existing deck and then modify it. So let's look at the Parrot Party deck. So let's look at this JSON in the JSON parser over here. So a deck has 3 fields. You have the name of the deck, you have the cards, all the possible cards for this deck, and then you have sets. Okay. All of these are pretty self-explanatory. Let's look at the cards. So the cards is a list of JSONs, and each JSON represents one card. Every card should have a name, an image, and a label. The name is a string, the image is a Cloudinary link to an image, and the label is the sort of the human readable name of the card, right? So names can be sort of, I think the pattern I use is lowercase. Let me just show you. Let's look at what is a game with cards that have names. Maybe Stoneball. Stoneball Snow, Stoneball Loot. Yeah, exactly. Let's look at this particular one. Okay, so you'll see, for example, the name of the card is it's usually lowercase. You can use camel case, you can use underscores, but it's just the behind the scenes name of the card. Whereas the label is the version, it's the nice, pretty looking string that you want human beings to see. So when they play this card, it'll say, you just played the chocolate 5, right? Whereas behind the scenes, this is the actual name of the card. Very often cards have more fields than just these 3, depending on what your game needs. Very often your card will have a type. Type is super useful because type is a filter that you can use when deciding what cards to play or move or discard. So many of the card actions accept a type field, and that's super useful. So you generally want a type field. You can have points. That's useful because very often there are methods that will they'll look at the points field of cards and do scoring based on that. You can have a suit. You can have other things, right? So let's look at a few decks here together. Let's look at the Picky Eaters recipes, right? So there's a name, there's an image, there's a label, there's a type, and then there's this custom field called food, which is a list of all the foods that this recipe accepts, right? Let's look at Skull King. So Skull King, a single card has a name, it has an image, it has a label, it has a type, it has a suit, it has a rank, and it has a weight. I use the weight to sort the cards in your hand, right? So there's a very fixed order for how these cards go in your hand. Suit and rank, for any trick-taking game, those are really useful because you're going to be sorting by those things a lot or determining the trick winner a lot on that basis. So that's any individual card, pretty self-explanatory. Let's look at this field called sets. So sets is just a grouping of cards that you're going to use. There's a limitation, which is that if you have multiple sets, you can't use all of them within the same game, which is kind of annoying. It's kind of a dumb limitation. It sort of defeats the purpose of having multiple sets if you can't use them in the same game. So the reason you'll see so many decks is that, for example, Picky Eaters, it makes sense to have all these decks, but then Picky Eaters also has special cards that go in their small, tiny deck because I don't have another way to pull these cards within the same deck. I can't just add this as a set within Picky Eaters and then pull it. So that's kind of dumb. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but the point is that if you have any special cards that Ludio is adding to the game, you usually need those in their own decks so that you can pull them in separately. Okay. Anyway, a set. The set has a name, and then the value is a JSON of key value pairs that show you how many of each card you have, and that's done by name. So Stoneball Loot, these are all the different cards that could be in the deck, and then the set tells you which ones are actually in this set. So you need 1 Marshmallow 10, you need 3 Marshmallow 5s, and so on and so forth. So I think that's also pretty self-explanatory. Once you have the deck, the way you pull it into Ludio is you call this action called create deck. So create deck asks you, okay, what's the name of the deck and what's the set that you're pulling from, and then it'll create a deck with this name. Okay, so that's how you create cards and then you pull them into Ludio. Okay, so that's I think it for card names. There's a lot of methods related to card names. Again, it's all documented really well, and if you look at an existing card game, you'll be able to learn how to do these, and of course, we'll help you with the debugging.